What's going on, everyone? About a month or so ago now, it was rumored that Russell Westbrook could potentially be traded to the Hornets, right? The big deals were the Indiana Pacers and the Charlotte Hornets. That those were the two teams that were willing to take on Russ because of the expiring contract. Not necessarily the player, but the contract to clear off cap space for their books. And the Lakers would take on, several players. With the Indiana Pacers, it was Brogdon and Buddy Hield. With the Charlotte Hornets, it was essentially a pick between these four players: Plumlee, Kelly Oubre, Terry Rozier, and then Gordon Hayward, right? It was essentially like take your pick between two or three of these players. We'll take on Russ. It's an expiring contract, which made sense for the Hornets because, one, they likely get some draft capital from the Lakers, but beyond that, it is to clear the salary off their books because they have to re-sign LaMelo Ball, and they need the cap space in order to do so. And they have essentially $100 million plus on the books between several of these players. So if they can unload that, for example, Rozier and let's say Kelly Oubre and Plumlee, then that clears off something like $30 to $40 million of cap space the following season. It might be a clunky fit with Russ and LaMelo. There's a lot of concerns there, but you kind of ride it out for a year. The team's young enough to have a bad season. You probably get a good draft pick if your team doesn't work out. Best case scenario, you make the playoffs with Russ, and Russ and LaMelo figure it out, and then he's off the books. You can let him go, and now you have all this cap space to sign LaMelo and potentially get another key component for the future. And you're clearing off some bad contracts that you don't really have intended for the future. Well, it is being further reported that this is a real thing, that the Hornets really do want to go after Russell Westbrook, that they think that it would be great and beneficial for them, but the reported trade has changed. The reported trade now is Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward. And you might be thinking, like, that's a lot to give up for Russell Westbrook. I mean, you're talking about two quality players, talk about two of the Hornets' best players, but they are on long-term contracts. And if you could clear these two players, you're not only saving, a potential 40, 50 million next season, but you're saving a potential 100 million over several years because these players are both locked into 4-year deals. So you have this long-term cap space that you're a young up-and-coming team. You need to re-sign LaMelo. You don't need these contracts on your books. And I think that this is hands down the best trade for Russell Westbrook if you're the Lakers. If this deal is really on the table as it's being reported, I think the Lakers have to take this. You get a guy in Terry Rozier who can play on or off the ball. He's a guy that can score, that can facilitate, that can do a lot. He can be your third scoring option and kind of replace the Malik Monk role, and in a more efficient, better manner, right? He's bigger. He can play better defense. We have seen Scary Terry just go off, scoring 50 points, things like that. And you get a quality wing in Gordon Hayward that can do a little bit of everything. Now, health concerns are a big thing with Hayward, but you have a 3-and-D wing that is also a guy you can run your offense through. This would just be the best case scenario for the Lakers as far as trading for Russell Westbrook. The concern is, and the rumor is, that the Lakers want to potentially trade Russ for a bigger name or let his money fall off the books, and then they have the cap space to go sign like a Bradley Beal or something like that the following season. So if that really is the case, I don't know if the Lakers would take this deal, but the Lakers would have leverage because you're taking on $100 million in cap space. So you likely don't have to give up more than one, maybe not even any future draft picks because there is an inherent value. The Hornets want to trade for Russell Westbrook because they want the cap relief for the future and to be able to re-sign LaMelo Ball. So the negotiation is like, hey, we're taking on, yes, two very great players, and you're taking on Russell Westbrook, but you're taking on Russell Westbrook because it's going to be hugely beneficial for your future. We're taking on long-term deals that may not go anywhere. Gordon Hayward has an injury history. Terry Rozier is a great player, but he's not a guy that's going to immediately make you a contender. We're taking on two role players that are overpaid and overvalued for the long haul. We're stuck with them for several years now. where you get to clear it off your books and you're in a great space. So the Lakers immediately get so much more leverage than they ever had before if Charlotte really wants to unload these deals, which makes a ton of sense for the Charlotte Hornets. They need to get these players off their books. Now you got a clean break. You're good. You run with Russ for 1 year. However it works out, whether it works out great or it works out bad, at the end of the year, all that money is now relieved, and you can go get other players, whether it's young players or another star. Maybe they go and try to get Bradley Beal, something along those lines. And they do have enough young pieces for their future that are really good. You got Bridges, you got PJ Washington, whatever happens with him, things like that. So you have these key components, and you don't really have the need for Rozier and Hayward for the long haul. You don't really need them for the future. And the rumor was that they wanted to keep Hayward because Kenny Atkins was supposed to come on as a coach. Well, that's not happening anymore. He's decided to stay with the Warriors, and he doesn't want to go to Charlotte. So now the deal very likely is on the table of like, hey, we need these players off our books for our future and to sign our star young player. So you take these players, we'll take Russ, we'll deal with him for a year, and you guys get some quality role players. And this is hands down the best trade we have seen for Russell Westbrook. I mean, as far as we knew, this deal was not on the table as of late. You could get one of these two, but you couldn't get both. Now the Charlotte Hornets are saying that they're willing to trade both based on reports within the Charlotte organization, is that they are willing to part with both of them to clear off $100+ million off their books for Russell Westbrook. And then if you're the Lakers, you're taking that in a heartbeat. I think if the Lakers have the opportunity, you do that. Because one, you can always use these. Like, let's say Bradley Beal says, I want to go to the Lakers. I'm not going to any other team. I want to go to the Lakers. Okay, great. If Beal really wants to go there, well, now you have these two pieces that you can use to trade, and they actually have value. Where Russ doesn't really have value. It's really hard to get him. But you're getting two players that could be valuable to other teams, or players that, you could move more easily in separate deals than you could Russell Westbrook, who most teams don't want, don't need, won't willing to take. Rozier would be more than happy, or teams would be more than happy to take on him. Some teams would likely take on Gordon Hayward, especially because wings are so prime in this league. And you'd have another deal off of their contracts to kind of be a sweetener, and then the Lakers kind of use those draft picks, and then they clear up the space to go get a Bradley Beal. So the idea of we could go get a star is still on the table. This just gives you more trading assets, but you have a solid team, and you have pieces and depth that you don't have otherwise. Because the Lakers' biggest problem is whether they keep Westbrook or not, they only have so much money to go get veteran minimum deals. And this free agency class is very light. There's not a lot of players that are of quality that are going to make you a contender this season, even with LeBron and Anthony Davis. But Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, you still have, Reeves, you still have Tucker, you still have Nunn, who now, if you get Scary Terry, you could even now look even further on exploring, Talen Horton-Tucker and Kendrick Nunn trades, because you have Rozier, who is a very similar player. Or you keep them both, and now you got two guys that are essentially the same player, yes, but one comes off the bench, one starts. You got somebody that can always relieve the other. LeBron's going to miss games, so if he does, Terry Rozier can play off the ball. So you could actually start Kendrick Nunn if you want, and start Nunn and Rozier and Hayward. And then you still have Anthony Davis. And the one thing that is in free agency right now is a lot of free agency centers. So they could still go get a center, a quality center, a floor spacing center. You go get, say, a Mo Bamba, right? You get a Mo Bamba. Anthony Davis slides into the 4 spot. You got Hayward at the 3 spot. You got LeBron at the point guard and Terry Rozier at the 2. And LeBron can play both on and off the ball, and so can Rozier. So one play set, you can have Rozier run point and orchestrate the offense, and LeBron pays off the ball. The next set, you can have LeBron do the same thing. You would have such a great and solid starting 5. You're still kind of hurting defensively, but Rozier and Hayward are both good defenders. You'd have Anthony Davis as a defender. The only real liability would be LeBron James, and he's not that much of a liability. And we've seen him buy in. We've seen him still have the ability to lock down players, things like that. This just does everything the Lakers need for this upcoming season. Does this make them contenders? Who knows? I mean, it depends on how well Hayward is health-wise as well as player-wise. How well does he fit in? But I do think he's a chameleon-like player that can kind of fit into any system. He's very unselfish. He's a guy that can go and get you 20 a night, things like that. Rozier, he has shown that he can fit on the ball, off the ball. These are pieces that I think you can glue into, and you're getting two great pieces. Now, does this make them better than most of the teams in the West? I don't know. I mean, that's up for you to decide. But in reality, nobody in the West was really world beaters. And you still have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. If they're both healthy, if this Laker team is healthy, this is a scary team. It really is. You know, whether you want to admit it or not, it is a scary team. Not to mention they'd still have all their money that they still have to go get other pieces. But you now have, instead of being, 5 deep, you're now 10 deep. Because you still have Stanley Johnson. You still have Wenyen Gabriel. If you get a backup center, you could have Anthony Davis play center, things like that. There's just so much potential. There's so many things in which they could do with these players on board. And one last little point that I'd like to add is I think personally, because the Hornets have expressed the willing to trade him in some of these packages, if the Lakers could go get Plumlee, I think they should do that as well. Even if it means giving up, let's say, a Kendrick Nunn. Because Kendrick Nunn is an expiring contract, right? And the whole point is for the Hornets to give up, is to give up contracts for expiring contracts to free up the books. Well, you could trade for Plumlee. You trade Kendrick Nunn, who Kendrick Nunn now is expendable because you have Terry Rozier, and they're very similar players. And you go get a Mason Plumlee, who is just an athletic freak of nature. He's shown that he can be a solid center in the league, and he's willing to do the dirty work. He doesn't demand the ball. He doesn't need a bunch of touches, anything like that. So you could have him as your starting fifth, or he's a guy that has been willing to come off the bench in the past. So if you do start Anthony Davis at the 5, you can have Plumlee be his backup, and then the games that Anthony Davis inevitably misses, you still have Plumlee to come in. Maybe you go sign another center, and now you have a solid squad. I mean, look at it like this. What if you had a starting 5 of Rozier, LeBron, Hayward, Davis, and Plumlee? I mean, that is really solid. You're young. You got much younger than you were last year. You got much better than you were last year. The pieces fit together so much more better. Anthony Davis and LeBron are just kind of fitting in with 3 of the key pieces for the Charlotte Hornets. And the Charlotte Hornets were pretty good last year. These players were pretty good for the Hornets last year. So I think no matter how you shake it, this is a great deal for the Lakers if this is really on the table. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think about this trade for Russell Westbrook? Again, this is being heavily reported that this is real, that this isn't just a rumor, this isn't just something, that the Charlotte Hornets are in negotiations and talking actively, like that they want this to happen. So the Lakers definitely have leverage. It's just, will they be willing? And they have to wait for Russ to opt in. That's very likely why this deal hasn't happened, if it really is on the table, because Russ has to opt in by June 29th. So once he opts in, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the trade, that this happens the same day. I wouldn't be surprised if, we see Russ and, Rozier and Hayward traded for Russell Westbrook. I think that that's a real possibility. But I'd also like to see them go get Plumlee as well, if that's possible. Maybe you do give up a draft pick in that case. I'd be willing with the Lakers to give up a future draft pick if you can get Plumlee in the deal as well. And now you got 3 pieces. You're getting a 1-for-3 swap, which the Lakers need because they have to fill out their roster. And they don't have a ton of money to do that. But you do a 3-for-1 swap, now you have that. Now you just added depth on top of, the 6 or 7 players that you would already have. You basically have your roster. Now you just go in and finding pieces that you think could be good in, case of injuries, things like that. But love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.